Today on Ponder This, I want to do something a little different. There's an idea that's been rattling around in my head for the last week or two, and I wanted to kind of chat it out with you and kind of see what you think, get some feedback on this. So this is going to be a little different, but we'll check it out next on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.
Well, hello there, everyday Americans. Paul Engel here with the Constitution Study. We are here again to read and study the Constitution and teach a rising generation to be free. And actually, I said this is going to be a little different, but I'll hold that for just a minute. As always, head to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Find out everything I'm working on for the Constitution Study. Find out when the book's coming out. Still working on that. Find out where I'm speaking. Most of all, engage me. Ask questions. Comment. I'm asking for a lot of comments on this episode because this one's going to be a little different. So let me try to explain this. Over the last few weeks to a month or so, I've noticed as I'm writing these articles that I print out and as I'm recording these and editing these podcast episodes, I've noticed a trend that I wanted to explore a little bit. And this has to do with what's going on in America. Hang on with me just a minute, see if this makes sense. You see, I have a lot of people that are complaining about a lot of things. Some people are complaining about the Supreme Court, or a certain opinion from the court, or a piece of legislation, or what a congressman says, or what a senator wants to do, or what a candidate is doing, or what the president is doing. I see a lot of people that have a lot of issues. I tend to agree with a lot of those issues. But I think we're missing a very important point. And I've kind of started, if you've watched several of the last episodes, you may see where I'm going. You see, a lot of these issues have to do with what we expect of government and what we expect of those we send to the government to represent us. Now, what do I mean? Well, let's take an example of red flag laws. I'm just picking one out of midair. But the idea of a red flag law is we need to be protected from bad people. Okay. But let me ask you a question. Where does it say that it's the government's job to protect us from bad people? Let me ask you another question. Where does it say that it's the government's job to provide for us if we fall into a situation where we can't provide for ourselves? Either because we're poor, or there's a catastrophic illness, or we get old. In other words, when did we go from being free and at liberty people to a people that have become dependent on the government? And again, this didn't happen overnight. This has been going on for decades. But more and more as I'm looking at what people on both sides are complaining about, more and more I see a certain common cause. If I drill down to the root of it, it's a question of, are we able to take care of ourselves or not? Put another way, I guess, will this experiment in self-government survive? I know, this is a little odd and it's a little different, so hang with me a minute and see if this still makes sense. You see, the preamble of the Constitution says that they formed this government. They created this Constitution to protect the blessings of liberty, the ability to live as you see fit, without interference. Yet so much of what we argue about today is not whether or not the government will interfere, but how much it's going to interfere in our lives. How much is it going to take in taxes? How much is it going to provide for us? Who is it going to provide for? Who does and does not get provision? Under what circumstances do they get provision? It disturbs me that the American people seem to have become dependents of the government rather than sovereign over the government. So that's what I want to kind of start a discussion here. I want you to put in the comments, what do you think? Do you see my point that so much of what we're discussing and debating has to do with the people being dependent on the various governments? with the government telling us what we can and cannot do, the government ordering us around, the government telling us what it will and will not provide for us, the government telling us what will be allowed and what won't be allowed, what light bulbs we can use, what toilets we can use, what products we can use, what drugs we can try, what medical treatments we are allowed to use, what we're allowed to bring on airplanes, what has to be in our cars, what has to be in our homes. All of these are being dictated to us by governments. And we've been so engulfed in it, I think we've lost the idea that all of this is the government telling us how to live our lives. And it's now become a fight over who gets to tell us how to live our lives rather than a fight over who gets to leave us alone. I was texting with a person a few days ago, and we talked about how the fact that the Congress is required to meet at least once a year. Our founders thought that the federal government would have so little to do, they may not need to meet every year. So let's make sure they meet at least once a year. Yeah, now they meet almost the entire year. So let me ask you, if the root cause is our dependence on government, if we've turned the government from a creation of the people to its masters, if our fight now is not whether or not the government will be limited to what we've said it will be limited to, but who will get to decide what those limits are, and those limits are being placed on us, have we lost the American experiment? So take some time, stop, think about it, watch the news, read the news, and then ask yourself, are people being left at liberty, or are they being told what they can and cannot do? Are we being ruled, or are we being governed? And I know this is a little different, it's a little odd. It really, about 2 weeks ago, started dawning on me just how often the articles I'm writing and the podcasts I'm recording are really a question of, are we at liberty or not? And if the root cause is that we, the American people, have forgotten how to be responsible for ourselves, well, then the question is, what do we do to turn that around? Can we turn that around? What ideas do you have to turn the American people from dependent on a government to dependent on ourselves? To stop asking the government to protect us and be willing to protect ourselves. To stop asking the government to provide for us and be willing to provide for ourselves. To stop fighting over the scraps that the government deems to allow us access to. And to once again rule the government and say, no, this is your boundary, this far and no farther, and if you can't stay within that boundary, we will fire you and find someone who will. I know, I'm different, I'm weird, I think about these things. The question is anybody else? And now that I've brought this to your attention, will you? So I hope you'll excuse this kind of oddball, ponder this out there episode. I think it's important, but I'm not entirely sure where it fits yet. And I'm not sure I have the whole picture yet. So that's why I want comments. I want people to think about this and to respond to this, and let's start a discussion. Is the root cause of our problems the fact that we've become dependent on government and we're now fighting over who gets to tell us how to live? Or is the root problem something else? Now, again, put your comments in, head to the website, constitutionstudy.com. Let me know if I'm totally off base, if I've totally missed it. I don't think I have, obviously, but I'll listen to what you have to say. But I'm curious when I see how much of the news articles I read and how much of the questions I get asked revolve around, what is the government going to let us do? Or what is the government going to force us to do? Which to me just seems like there's way too much power in government. When someone in government tells you, we will not let you, I think we've got things backwards and upside down. But if we don't recognize that, we can't fix it. So head over to the website, comment, question, show examples. There are other examples that I didn't mention? Let's start a discussion about whether or not we will be a free people or a ruled people. And if I haven't totally freaked you out, I hope I'll see you again here next time on the Constitution Study.
There's one thing you have to know wherever you make your stand. Came from a long through line of everyday Americans.